Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience, episode number 287. Subscribe to our mailing list to receive weekly updates and exclusive content delivered right to your inbox. Go to drfrancesrichards.com. That's drfrancesrichards.com to subscribe to our mailing list and be entered into our monthly drawing. That's drfrancesrichards.com, drfrancesrichards.com to subscribe to our mailing list and be entered into our monthly drawing. We promise we won't spam you or sell your information. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black entrepreneur experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. Our next guest is a Black business leader who exited Wall Street to make his mark in the cryptocurrency revolution by launching Calaxy. Welcome, Solo Ceesay.
Thank you for having me. Definitely appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
I've given our audience, Solo, such a brief bio. Why don't you fill in the gaps and share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your business?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Solo Ceesay. I grew up in the Midwest in St. Louis. My parents are of West African descent. My mom is from Senegal. My dad is from Gambia. After growing up in St. Louis, I had the privilege of going to the University of Pennsylvania, where I was a member of the Division I football team. And I also studied at the Wharton Business School. And doing the very Wharton thing, I ended up working on Wall Street as an investment banker for a number of years in New York before very recently calling my job quits and moving out to Los Angeles in pursuit of pushing my new business, Calaxy, which is a blockchain-based social media platform aimed to help creators, influencers, and celebrities and pro athletes monetize their fans by offering intimate connections and interactions with them, as well as selling NFTs. And so that's a little bit about me. Happy to keep going, but that's the skinny.
Talk about that exit from Wall Street to your own business.
Yeah, I would say it's quite different when it comes to becoming a founder versus working at a large institution like an investment bank. You know, you have to think about, 0 to 100, % of your business, right? Like whereas at, a big company, there's a ton of different structure that exists so that you don't really have to focus on the day-to-day, operational aspects of a business, right? Like you show up, you do your job, you go home, and that's kind of it. You leave the weekends and you don't think about it, out of sight, out of mind until you come back for the next week. In investment banking, you work on the weekend sometimes, so that's obviously hyperbole, but nonetheless, your job description kind of starts and finishes with, what you were hired to do. But as a founder, your job description is pretty much endless, right? You have to own 100% of your business. You're pushing it every single day. It's your baby. And it becomes a very big extension of your life. I wouldn't say it's just your life. It's very important to have free time and obviously enjoy leisure. But at the same time, it's quite different in that way, working with a much smaller team versus a big, massive, organization that has endless resources. We've been fortunate enough to be able to raise capital effectively and have a great team, people around me. So I can't say anything less than, that I've been excited to embark on this journey, but it certainly has been a change.
Talk about raising capital.
Yeah, raising capital is super important, and being able to do so effectively is, the pinnacle of, what it means to becoming a founder and starting a successful business. So for us, we're pretty unique in that we raise capital from a lot of different types of parties. So like I mentioned, Calaxy is a platform for influencers, celebrities, famous people with public figures to be able to connect with their fans. In a lot of cases, these guys are high net worth individuals. So, that narrative was something that spoke a lot to them, made a lot of sense to them. And so they've actually contributed to our rounds as well. And in addition, we're built on blockchain technology. So we have a lot of crypto funds as well, in terms of our investor pool, and then obviously traditional VC money. So being able to speak the language and talk to all those different stakeholders in the ecosystem was super important to be able to raise the $7.5 million that we were able to close in our first round of seed funding. And so I would say for us, it was, super helpful and instrumental to be able to have the connections that we do. So like I mentioned, I played Division I football. I'm pretty close with a lot of people that actually made it to the professional leagues, both in the NBA and the NFL. My co-founder, Spencer Dinwiddie, who plays on the Brooklyn Nets currently. He, obviously being in the NBA, has a lot of connections as well. And so we've been able to rely on those connections by being young, Black in the scene and doing something that speaks a lot to our culture and demographics. So the authenticity is there, but then also having the experience of being able to connect with, different investors from my previous life made us very effective in doing so and raising capital.
Talk about cryptocurrency. What is something that we as consumers don't know about it that we should know about it?
Yeah, I would say cryptocurrency and blockchain is definitely a big opportunity area. When you think about the generation, technology that we've had, this is one of those other, big opportunities for there to be, not only massive wealth creation, but to be early to a generational change in the way that we move and use our, and use money and think about money, right? And it's not just the transferring of value, it's a lot of different things. So blockchain as a technology can be applied to a lot of different, but then also in terms of the, monetary aspects of it, it makes a lot more sense to be able to send money as seamlessly as a text message, right? Like, for example, I went to go buy a car. As soon as I moved to Los Angeles, I tell this story a lot. So if any viewers have made it to this interview from all my other ones, I apologize. This is probably the 18th time you've heard this, but I bought a car as soon as I moved to Los Angeles, went to the dealership and wanted to put a down payment on it. And then in order to do that, I had to go to the bank, get a cashier's check and, come back to the dealership. Went to the bank was closed. And that was it. The bank was closed. So I couldn't give them money. I had to wait till the next day in order to go back when the bank was open. And relying on that sort of, centricity or like the centralization of our society as it currently stands, forces me to do that. And the reason why we've been okay with doing that is because I've done it, my mom's done it, my mom's mom has done it, and that's just the life that we live. But there is technology out there that allows you to do these things as seamlessly as a text message, right? So for somebody that's privy to such technology, it seems kind of crazy that you can't do that, right? Like I could just give you the money. I have, XYZ money to be able to transfer to you, but I can't act on it because it's not, fully adopted as a technology. And so I think, there's definitely a lot of volatility in the asset class, which comes with, quite honestly, momentum buyers, speculative buyers, people who don't really, believe in the technology the way that it's meant to be believed in. It's just more of a asset that could create, wealth. But once you start to look at the deep, inner root workings of the technology, the application of it becomes quite obvious.
Solo, look over the last 30 days. What was your biggest win?
I would say the biggest win over the last 30 days would certainly be, we actually have been able to continue to close on some really big names and influencers. And that's a very important part of our business. Being able to say that we are for creators by creators, meaning, obviously Black culture drives, pop culture these days. And a lot of these social media platforms aren't built by people that look like those people. And so what is, important about our narrative is that we look like those people. And so I'd say, the biggest win is being able to see that validated in the press. And we've had a lot of different press hits over the recent months. And so being able to have that sort of validation from not just creators themselves saying, wow, this is really dope. This is finally something for us, by us, created by people who understand us and get us, but also just the idea of, us being able to have that, faith shown and people wanting to, contribute to our rounds because they're an influencer, but they have the means to do so. But also, joining, feeling as a founder is feeling that validation or feeling like you've been seen. Somebody believes in your idea for its merit and nothing else. So I think that's probably the biggest win that I've experienced, just, the creators as the gem to our business.
And how do you celebrate your wins?
Ooh, celebrating my wins. My mom has got on me a lot for that because I'm not that great at it. But, as a founder, it's very important to celebrate your wins along the way, just because it's a tireless job. And sometimes it's thankless and sometimes it feels like a lot. But it's super important to embrace your wins and celebrate along the way. And so, I've been fortunate that even, outside of, moving from the East Coast where I have a lot of family, I have a lot of great friends and family members out on the West Coast as well. So being able to make the time and the effort, as hard as it might seem as a founder, because your time is very scarce, it's very necessary to be able to spend that time with your family, going out to dinner, going out to movies, and, being able to enjoy the nice weather that is Los Angeles. That's kind of how I've been able to celebrate, my wins across the states now at this point. Over here, I've been fortunate that I have a great support system here too.
Talk about business continuity. What is your highest risk as a business owner?
Your highest risk as a business owner, I think, in this day and age is competition, especially when you're thinking about big tech and tech in general, how we are. You have the legacy platforms like a Facebook, like an Instagram, like a Twitter, those big Goliaths that have the ability to, quite honestly, do anything. A good idea is a good idea, but they have the means to execute on an idea in ways that you can't even comprehend. So I think for us as a business, it's super important to have that sort of, authentic narrative, because that's what people are signing up for. It's not just the tech. It's not just the idea. It's also who's selling it, right? And like, people get behind people. And so I think for us, we've been fortunate enough to have, a fantastic team, a fantastic origin story that's helped combat that. But then also, I think in general, you have to find a way to offer a unique solution to what could be a common problem. There's tons of different solutions for what it is that, we're even looking to solve. They have their pitfalls in some way, shape, or form. But I think what we've done that's different is taking crypto and bringing it to pop culture, right? That hasn't been done yet. And so and there's a reason why it hasn't been done, is because it's hard and arduous, right? Like, just like you asked in the first question, what do people don't know? There's a ton that people don't know. There's a ton I don't know, because we're starting to get comfortable with the technology and stuff like that. So I think from that perspective, it's been super exciting to see the growth. But ultimately, I would say that's probably the biggest risk, or biggest challenge that we see, rather, as a business.
Talk about naming the business.
Yeah, so Calaxy had been inspired by the creator's galaxy, which basically means that we want to, unbound the bounds in which that people interact with fans and creators, right? At this point in time, if you wanted to FaceTime LeBron James, good luck. It's super hard for you to do that. You could hit him on Instagram. He gets thousands of messages a day. He's not looking for that type of business there. And there aren't any really good comprehensive tools for him to be able to capitalize on the fact that his fans want to do that. The naming of Calaxy really came from the fact that we wanted it to be something that was, grandiose, big scale, something that made people feel like, they could do anything. And so that's quite literally how we approach the naming process. And, building on, blockchain technology, we view ourselves as a gateway product, right? So the one thing I would say is that we aren't something that's hard to pick up and use. Anybody should be able to use it. It's a lot more like a social application than it is, opening up your Robinhood and trading crypto, right? Like, we don't want it to feel like that. And so really the naming just came from the fact that we want this to be a platform for everyone, whether you're the most avid crypto user and, it's a part of your second nature, or somebody that's never seen it before. We want it to be something that was all encompassing.
And what can we do right now to support Calaxy?
I think at this point in time, you can sign up for our beta. We are in the process of rolling out what would be a public beta, which should be coming out very soon on our website, www.calaxy.com, CALAXY.com. And you can sign up for the public beta so that you can get early access there. And following us on socials. We're on all major social platforms, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it. So I would say those are probably the biggest ways to support, but also, keep up to date with what's going on, not just at Calaxy, but in the crypto space too. We see ourselves as one of those opportunities to educate, the masses on crypto and its possibilities. Just like we do for our creators, we want to do that for our fans. We want to be known as the guys that helped bring crypto to the pop culture.
What is your zone of genius, Solo?
Zone of genius. Wow. I would say that, I think I would say the way I would frame it is what I'm really good at, that I think I'm a lot better at than a lot of other people, is being to be a dot connector. Like, I think I'm very good at taking, things. And if you even think about Calaxy as the best representation of that, I'm taking something that is so complex, so crazy, so convoluted, something that's clunky, that doesn't really make sense, although it has a ton of utility, which is blockchain technology, and applying it to things that everybody understands. Like, right? Like, how do you get, a Matt James, the Bachelor, or an Ezekiel Elliott from the Dallas Cowboys to look at crypto, right? Like, Calaxy is one of those first avenues that could really help introduce that to those people. So being able to bridge that gap and be able to see that market opportunity, I think is something that I've been pretty good at doing, whether it was from a previous life or growing up, West African in the United States. You have to learn how to speak a ton of different languages. And I'm not just speaking, literal languages. It's like, my parents are very different than, most parents of people around here, right? Like, you have to see the opportunities to bridge the gap and connect. I mean, I think I've lived in that gap my entire life.
What is your weakness as an entrepreneur?
My weakness. I think this is cliche, but I'm a perfectionist. I think everything always has to be perfect all the time, which honestly, as a founder, that will waste a ton of your mental like capacity, like trying to ask questions as to why this isn't absolutely perfect or why it didn't end up exactly how you wanted, et cetera. So I would say from that perspective, I would say, that's probably my biggest weakness is just being caught up on that stuff. But the one thing I do say that I combat that is good, that combats that is the fact that, given my sports background and football in particular, it's always been about the next play, right? Like you're not going to win every single play. And you don't need to win every single play to win the game. Quite honestly, you can win less than half if you win the right one. So like, I think from that perspective, I think I've been able to adopt it into my everyday life.
Is there a social cost tied to your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, what we really want to do is empower the creators, right? So at this point in time, if you think about the creator economy, everybody else gets paid before the creators. And owning your own content or owning your own rights to your own stuff and your intellectual property is something that is, a very, very little talked about topic in the entertainment industry. And so what we're aiming to do is rectify that, by using the fans and getting them more involved. And at the same time, cutting down the barriers and making everything peer-to-peer, direct to consumer, right? If you're a fan to an influencer, influencer to a fan. We want to lower those bounds because when you're able to do that, you're able to cut out the excess fat that lives in the ecosystem right now. So I think from our perspective, the biggest thing we wanting to do is create a more equitable way for creators to monetize themselves. Because again, not every single creator is wealthy, right? Like a lot of these people might have 250,000 followers on Instagram, but like may not be paying their rent every single month, right? Like there's a very, very big issue with that. If you can influence it that many people, your likeness itself should be worth something. And so what we're aiming to do is help build a product for that creator middle class. The flashy names are great. They can obviously use it, but as well as ultimately, we want to be a platform that services every single type of creator.
What is the best decision you've made as a leader?
Best decision I've made? I would say the best decision I've made as a leader would be to, generally know when to task things for myself or task things with people who are more capable of doing them than myself, right? So like, I think as a founder, a lot of people think that they need to be head in charge for every single decision that happens. But I think the best decision I've made is, taking the time to specifically line out that I want my best players to make the best plays in their respective fields. I don't need to be the judge, jury, and the executioner for every single topic. So like if I hire my CTO, like I want him to play, MVP minutes as a CTO. I don't need to be spending my time making decisions on the technology aspects of our business. The same thing with, my chief strategy officer and fundraising, all that stuff, right? Like I think the biggest thing was, being able to level set and make sure that everybody on the team felt confident with the fact that ultimately I want this to be a platform where everybody's able to feel comfortable and play their minutes where they should. And that's how you get the best of the best out of your players. And that's how you get the best out of your team.
Someone's listening to this podcast and they're saying, I'm a content creator. How do I connect with Calaxy?
Yeah, so we make it pretty simple. We want it to be, the case that you can very easily find us. So on our website, there's a creator application, and we take a lot of applications as well. We got here because of our friends and family network. So Spencer and I know a ton of people in the space, just given who we are. But we want to be a platform for everybody. So being able to sign up there and fill out the questionnaire there, and somebody from our team will reach out to you and hope to onboard you guys. But yeah, that's really how it works. We want to be a platform for everybody.
Talk about legacy. When it's all said and done, how do you want to be remembered?
I think I want to be remembered as somebody that made sense of something that nobody understands. I think I wanted to be one of the guys that helped popularize a new way for us to live our lives in a way that is familiar and easy and touches on the hearts of every single person, right? Like everybody has the people they admire, right? That's the one thing that people understand. And I think from our perspective, our approach to bringing crypto to the masses was through social media and interactions and people at the end of the day, right? Like everyone has been shoving crypto and blockchain technology as a means for, a better life, et cetera, in a lot of these intangible ways. But what people always understand is people. And so what we wanted to do is bring crypto to the masses in a way that made sense and was familiar to them so that they'd be willing to hear and receive it. And there's going to be a ton of brand recognition that comes with being the 26-year-old Black kid along with his 28-year-old co-founder who also happens to be in the NBA, bringing that sort of technology to, the masses. So that's kind of what we aim to do in a way. And then lastly, we want to give back some of the power to the hands of the creators and our people. As Black people, we've been super powerful through numbers of generations. And I think now is about the time that we start to build something for ourselves. So I think from our perspective, that's what we hope to accomplish here at Calaxy.
You talked about influencers. Who is your top two influencers or mentors, and what lessons do they teach you?
Ooh, I would say number one, you have to go with your moms. Like my mom is my number one. My mom is a West African woman, businesswoman who had to fight 100 times harder to get half as much for anything. And she lived in, that sort of, in between area for a long period of time, even more so than I did, being stuck between, back home and here. And that's not easy to do. So I think from my mom, I learned perseverance and diligence and just having a relentless work ethic that allowed me to kind of get to where I am today. Like Wall Street isn't an easy job. It's not made for everyone, but I think, my African heritage provided me with the resources and tools to be able to take that on. And then also I would say, my second mentor, I would say, is a conglomerate of, people in the crypto space. Like I've been fortunate to have great mentors along the way, my teammates and my co-founder being one of them, but then also, our advisory board. We have some of the best advisors in the world on our project. Like we have, Roham from Dapper Labs, who's, the CEO of, NBA Top Shots, hot new NFT app. Everybody was talking about NFTs a couple months ago, and that guy was the guy behind it. So to be able to call him an advisor as a resource has been instrumental in how, becoming a first-time founder, because it's not easy. I'm figuring this out as we go, but we've been lucky enough to do a great job. So I'd say it's, on the back of my mom and, my advisory board, Adrian as well from Liquify and different aspects and different people from there. Like we've been beyond blessed.
What do you need right now that you don't have to move the needle forward?
I would say from our perspective, what we really need to discover is product market fit. So like, what do people really want Calaxy to be? And how do we get there, right? Because at this point in time, we've been designing internally and somewhat externally by inviting some people into our private beta internally. But ultimately, we want to figure out what do the markets need and what will be necessary for there to be an adoption of crypto. Like, what do the fans need? So I think, being able to have, the ability to have somebody on the staff or on the team that's in the business of knowing how to, receive market feedback and iterate and build a product that people want to use would be super important. So I think that's kind of the biggest opportunity for us. Luckily, we have a lot of experienced team members who've done that at various venues, but you can never have too much of that.
Solo, the word is listening. What is that resounding sound or message that your generation is saying that we should be listening to?
I would say that our generation needs to believe in themselves, right? Like I think we grew up in a culture where, I don't want to be cliche, but hating is popularized, right? And I think, people look at, things like Instagram, look at social media at large for validation. But I think ultimately the biggest thing that you can do for yourself is believing in yourself, because once you do that, then you'll have people start to follow you, right? Like when it comes to raising capital and raising $7.5 million, like you don't just hand that over to a kid that's 26 that's never done it before, right? And there were a lot of times that I was in the room with people that had done this 8 million times more than me, and I had to convince them of why my idea was a better approach to solving this problem. Right. And so I think from that perspective, just having that confidence, that unwavering diligence and determination to get to your goal, no matter what anyone else says, I think is the most important piece of advice I could give to, this generation.
What book would you recommend and why?
So I'm a Wall Street guy. I really like Liar's Poker. That's a really good one. I think that's super important just because it tells you a little bit about kind of, what it's like coming up and how it can be very difficult. Wall Street's not an easy place to be. It's the boiler room, and a lot of different aspects of it shaped me into who I am today. And there were some things that I had to come almost unlearn because our culture is a bit different, right? So like, I think startup culture is very different than Wall Street culture, for the good and the bad. But I think in general, what that book taught me is about, hard work and how to continue to be, to make it through, when things are always, aren't always easy. I would also say Rich Dad, Poor Dad, just as a personal finance group, is a good one. I think in our community, it's super important for there to be a bit more education and clarity on personal finances and wealth creation. So I think that's probably another book that I'd recommend.
And talk about the worst moment in business and what was your takeaway?
The worst moment in business. Thankfully, we haven't had too many, but I know that every business does. I would say the worst moment really probably had to do with, ultimately just a miscommunication in terms of what was released in terms of like PR and things like that. Like, what's very important is that understanding that as high profile, as fun as it is to have a high profile business that's being in the news, it's super important super important to be diligent about what is going out and how it's being said and what's being communicated because people are listening. So I think for us, just being able to make sure that that narrative is always 100% tied true to whatever it is that's also being said from the company, because there's multiple speakers and mouths for the company. And I think that's most important. So I think the biggest one is probably just realizing that, you can't make mistakes and hope that people don't see them. At this point, we're a little bit past that point. People have eyes on us and they're starting to learn more about what it is we're doing.
Talk about exiting Wall Street, and what was that moment, that aha moment that you said, or that story that said it's time to exit?
I would say when the job became no longer any fun. I think the job used to be very fun for me. It was a very fast, nice, new, sexy job to have in New York after, going to a school like Penn. That was great. And then all your friends are doing it too. But over time, you start to find purpose in your life, right? Money and finance was not the biggest motivator in how I was going about my days. And it made the job, less enticing to me over time. And so I think it was kind of, one day over the summer last year, I realized, do I really want to be doing this? I looked to my left, I looked to my right, with all due respect, but I looked at them and I don't know if I really want to have their life. I don't know if I aspire to have their life anymore. Is this making me truly happy? Is this me using my brain and my intellectual capacity to the highest level? And the answers to those questions were resoundingly no. And so that's when I knew that I needed to really think about and reevaluate, whether or not I was giving myself or doing myself a disservice by staying there any longer. So I'd say that's kind of how my process went. I spoke to a ton of different mentors that I've had along the way, and they were super helpful in me, organizing my thoughts. But I would say that's kind of what my process really looked like.
Talk about self-care. What does self-care look like to Solo?
Self-care makes sure that you're up to speed and 100%, have visual on your mental health. For me personally, I think that's the biggest one for me, is making sure that I'm doing everything that I can to be, to tend to my inner self. Right. And I think I, as a workaholic, definitely, spend time, prioritizing the wrong things sometimes, because at the end of the day, if you never prioritize your mental health, you are doing the wrong thing. So I think self-care really just means to tend to those, to tend those aspects of your life, and making sure that you do your absolute best to make sure that you take care of yourself, in and outside of the office.
Talk about pivot, the pandemic, and profits.
Yeah. I think the pandemic showed us that in a lot of different ways, that there are businesses that had to completely change their business model, but ultimately were able to make, tons of money and generate tons of revenue. I think you need to be nimble as a business, and the pandemic showed us just that nothing is ever recession proof, right? I think you learned about businesses that you're like, wow, I couldn't believe that real estate wasn't a safe haven anymore, right? That's something that's crazy, because people have always professed, and even in Rich Dad Poor Dad, the idea of buying land and real estate and stuff is super important for wealth creation. But things like the virus come out of nowhere, and you're like, wow, I really have to be nimble. And so I think from that perspective, it just teaches you that you can never get too comfortable. The world as it currently stands is great, but it won't be that in the next, 5, 10, short, medium, long term. So it's super important to be nimble and be aware of the fact that things like that happen, and you got to be ready to capitalize on when your opportunity is. And, business ideas are created. We're talking via Zoom. I didn't know what Zoom was prior to the pandemic. That's kind of crazy when you think about it, right? Zoom made a whole business. They created some massive wealth and changed the way that we're going to be doing things. After the pandemic is over, we're going to be using Zoom just because people realized there was a lot more efficient way to do business in certain aspects, right? So I think that's kind of what those words mean to me.
Solo, I want you to have a monologue. I want you to name the person that you're talking to, living or not. And this person has inspired you so much. Who is that person, and what are you saying to that person?
Yeah. So I spoke about my mom earlier. I guess another mentor of mine, or another figure that was super important, is Tyrone Thomas. He is no longer with us. He was one of my first bosses. Actually, he was my first boss when I moved onto Wall Street. He's a powerful Black man that you didn't really see many of those on the street. And I think for him, he was, instrumental in me being able to be as successful as I was, because finally there was an opportunity for me to see somebody that I could aspire to be like, right? In every single aspect of the word, somebody that understood me, somebody that we shared culture with, somebody that ultimately would, it has been me. I think what's very important is that for most people that work on Wall Street, they can look down the hall and say, oh, I want to be like that guy. I see myself in that guy, right? But that was super important and powerful for me to be able to do that, because there aren't a lot of Black people on Wall Street. And so, I think for him, ultimately when he passed a year after or so, of me working there, it was super tough on me, but I think it was one of the greatest motivating factors, because I knew that at least I had that. For a second, I hung on to it every single day that I stepped in the office, and I made sure that I put up as many points on the board that I could every single day in his name. And so I would say, for him, I would just extend a great thank you, because that just transformed my life for forever. I'm doing Calaxy and all these other things as well because of that. He gave me that confidence in myself in a way that, I never really had in myself at some point in time too. So I think, that would be my first. Tyrone Thomas, rest in peace.
And so sorry about your loss.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
What is the best advice you were ever given?
Best advice that I was ever given? Shoot, we're on the same topic. Tyrone Thomas, he hit me with it hard day one. He was saying that, you can't let people see you while you're down. You can't let people feel that energy about you being down, right? I think from our perspective, you think about kind of you make a mistake or, something doesn't go your way and you wear that on your face, people pick up on that energy. And I think from, my perspective, that was something that was very tough, because adjusting to the Wall Street lifestyle is tough for everybody. And it was tough for me. And so I think for him, he was mentioning the fact that as a Black man, you have to be powerful. You have to be, and you are powerful just because of who you are. And so making sure that you never lose sight of that was super key. And so he was, abundantly vocal about the fact that I can't let my losses weigh me down.
And how did he become your mentor?
So I went out of my way. So when I got to the street, I wanted to network, because I wanted to be the most popular guy on the trading floor. I wanted to know every single person, because I think that's ultimately how that job works, right? Everybody that works on Wall Street, they're supremely intelligent. They're all smart. That's great and all, but they're not like rocket scientists, right? But the most important thing is having that ability to connect with people, because that's just how business is done. Whether it's there or even at Calaxy, it's super important to be able to, connect with others and the intended audiences in the way that they need to be connected with. For me, I sent cold emails out to, all of the Black, managing directors across the floor. There weren't too many, as well as a number of different, strategic, mentors that would be nice to have along the way. And that's kind of how it started. But, ultimately he was more than willing and, receiving of my messaging and, invested his time in me. And hopefully he can look back and say that that was a good use of his time, because, I've been able to be, pretty successful. And I attributed a lot of that success to the mentors that I was able to find.
What have you not done in life that you dream about often that you would like to do?
So, fun fact, I actually have not been to West Africa. I've not been to Africa yet. I am going at the end of this year, God willing, which is going to be really exciting to connect back there. During my adolescent years, I was playing football a lot during the summer. So when my family would go, I was always at camp here trying to do my very best to go to the Division I level, which ended up working out. But I think what I'm really excited about is going back and just seeing the development and just seeing it for myself, right? And connecting with it. It's such a big part of my culture and every single aspect of my life. So it's going to be super nice to finally, close the loop there.
Is your mom going to go with you?
I think it might be a kid's trip, because I think I'm trying to have a little bit more fun than that. Just a little bit. I hope my mom doesn't let me have just a little bit more fun than that, but maybe next time.
Talk to a younger you. What advice would you give to a younger you?
I would say that you need to try things that you like, and things that you ultimately do like might be different than what you previously thought. And what I mean by that is, part of growing up and finding your career is trying things that you do like and finding out what you don't like. It's almost more valuable to figure out what you don't like, because that'll probably help you narrow your focus to something that could eventually be a career. And then also just take paths less traveled. If you like, right? If you happen to be fully aligned with, what the status quo is, great, do that, because that's what will make you happy. But ultimately, I think for me, the way in which I came about working on Wall Street, I ended up going into divisions and teams that I thought would be interesting, not because of, what anyone else had said. So I think for me personally, just making sure that you do your very best to, figure out what you do and don't like is instrumental to, building a career.
There are so many brands and businesses that are dominating. Talk about a brand or a business that's dominating that you admire and why.
I mean, so I did just become a new Tesla owner. So I am very excited about that. Tesla is a great one. And I think they're a great case study, right? Because I think, what I was talking about a lot about crypto and how it's not been adopted quite truly yet because there's a bit of an educational aspect that goes with it. I think that user experience is key, and those guys got it down at Tesla, right? Ultimately, you open up, or you get into a Tesla car and it just works. You know how to use it. It's intuitive. The experience is something that you'll never forget. And every single time you get into a Tesla, it feels like the first time again. And I think from that perspective, that's something we would like to recreate for us because we are going to remember. And that's how you build a successful business. You take things that are convoluted, crazy, and you make them very easy to use. And so I think for us, same thing with Apple even. You open up a laptop and you just know how it works. It works. You don't know why it works. It just works. Same thing with blockchain. That's what we hope to do is, help make it seamless and easy for people to use. And so I'd say, those are the two companies that I admire, and their business strategy was quite honestly generational. So that's what I'm really excited about. I like those companies.
If someone wrote an autobiography about you, Solo, what would the title be?
Shoot, that's a good question. What would the title be? I would say something cheesy, like Bridging the Gap, or like being caught in between two worlds, something like that. Like, African American, but like have a picture of like Africa here, and then like my Wall Street and like American life here. I don't know, like my parents here and the rest of everybody else here. Something like that. Just because I feel like for me personally, I've been that connector, bridging that gap my entire life. And I think it's probably the biggest asset that I have.
What problem exists in the world today that you'd like to solve?
Going back to the equitability aspect of it, I want there to be a scenario where Black people are able to, connect with their fans, but also like get credit where credit is due, right? Like we live in a world where, TikTok's massive social media app where there are TikTok dancers that are doing Black inspired dances that are getting paid crazy endorsement deals off of that work, right? Like, because there literally is no such thing as intellectual property on TikTok. Like people literally just copy each other's dances over and over again. And the ones that become popularized are oftentimes found in the Black community. And I think just the censorship or the centricity of, those platforms allows for the algorithms to do that, right? But what ultimately the ethos of blockchain technology and why we built a blockchain-based social app is that we want it to be the case that, that's all up to the community, right? No one person, not me, not Spencer, not anybody can control the way in which that this ecosystem grows over time. We'll have our vote in it the same way that everyone else does, but that's what decentralization is, right? Like not being able to point to two dudes in the boardroom and say, hey, that's like how it's going to be. That's it, right? So that's ultimately what I would say I'm most excited about. I mean, I think that's probably what the biggest issue that I'm very passionate about is.
Let's talk about redo. Is there an event in your life that you would like to redo?
I would want to redo my entire college football career, I would say. I think for me personally, it was something that was very tough. I picked up football a little bit later on in life. There are always those people that have those. I remember I put my first helmet on when I was 8 years old and stuff like that. My parents weren't having that back then. They did not want me to play football until I was much older. But I think for me, all of my skill and all of the validation I got came very quickly. And I think I didn't receive it in the way that I should have. And I think it made me a little bit less coachable than I should have been. When I got to college, I wish I would have been a little bit more, open to, the coaching that I was receiving, just because of the fact that I had the opportunity to play at some very large, prestigious schools on the football side, but chose to go to a school where I could focus on academics and things like that. But I thought because of that, it might have been like a fast pass to being on the field as much as I wanted and things like that. And, fortunately, I was able to contribute my freshman year, but I think ultimately over time, I would have had a more rewarding college football career if I had a little bit more of a, an open attitude to being there for being there.
Advice you wish you had followed?
I think I wish, after I got my job, so the way it works on Wall Street is you do an internship, and then after the internship, they decide if they're going to give you a job or not. And so for me, as soon as I got that internship, because, I've been talking to my parents about this for years at this point, I was like, you know what, I'm on Wall Street. This is great. This is amazing. I got the job offer. I signed it without even looking. I was like, you know what, this is amazing. I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. I think for me personally, I wish I would have just taken the time to, look around a little bit. Maybe I would have done a job and, took a job in consulting or something like that. I think I just was so, happy and, as, based off my background and stuff, a lot of times you look for that security. And so I think as soon as I got that opportunity, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I had a good enough job. Why? Figure out, is the grass always greener? Like that sort of thing. But ultimately, I think if I could redo it over again, I would have, probably taken the job, just given that I had a great opportunity doing it and I really liked it. But I would have just looked and seen, what else was out there. Because part of what my other advice is figure out what you do and don't like, and figure out, just so that you can get a bit more focus on what you would want to pursue in a career.
Is there a social cost tied to your business?
I think for us, it's really mostly about just, putting power in the back of the hands of the creators and the fans, right? Like, I think, when you think about the music industry or the entertainment industry at large, everyone gets paid prior to them, getting paid. And so I think for us, we wanted to create an opportunity for there to be that direct to consumer channel for influencers and creators to interact with their fans. And ultimately, when you're able to, do away with some of the legacy framework that exists in the ecosystem, you're able to make it a lot more, efficient. And I think with that, you bring pricing down for every single party involved. Fans don't have to pay as much because creators don't need to get charged as much because they're getting more of their pie. And so I think that's super important. And then lastly, too, the creator middle class is booming. Like, it's not just the case that, we're talking about famous people that on TV, but like nowadays you can walk on the street and walk by somebody that has 100,000 followers on Instagram, right? Like that's not that uncommon here in Los Angeles, at least. And those same people might have issues making ends meet. Why is that? Because the current structure in place means that, influence doesn't have a value, but I would argue quite differently. If you have that type of influence around yourself, that should be worth something. So I think from our perspective, that's the biggest cause that we care about.
If you conducted this interview, what is the one question you would have asked yourself? I want you to ask the question and answer it.
I would say the question that I would have asked would be kind of, what gave you the audacity to try and go up against these big giants, like these big, legacy companies? You want to talk about trying to take on a Cameo or a Patreon or these huge creator platforms, and you're adding blockchain to it. Don't you think you're biting off a little bit more than you can chew? And I think my answer would probably be just because we're different. Like we didn't aspire to go out and do something that had been repeatable or anything like that. We wanted to do something that was revolutionary, and we wanted to make sure that we could do it with our friends and create a movement. The only way that you could create a movement is doing something that's novel, big, and it's going to be grandiose. And at times I ask myself that same question, like, man, this is a big idea. You don't think you could have done a little bit something similar and did something fun? But at the end of the day, I always go back to, the roots. And we want to change the way in which that we think about blockchain technology. That's what we aim to solve, which is a very big thing to solve because there's so much, opacity in that market right now, or in crypto and blockchain and DeFi. There's so much that people need to uncover. And so it's definitely a big job, but we're definitely suited for the challenge. So we're really excited about the future.
Solo, we've come to the part of our interview. It's called Fun Facts Lightning Round. I'm going to ask you a series of questions and I want you to give me very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Fun Facts Lightning Round?
Yep, let's go.
Your favorite color?
Blue.
Your first job?
I worked at MasterCard in corporate finance as an intern.
The last movie you saw?
Last movie I saw was 21 Jump Street.
You relax doing what?
Working out.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
The Weeknd is my favorite singer, best singer of all time.
Your favorite dance song?
Dance song? Ooh. Something by Burna Boy. Anything like Afrobeats. I love that. Burna Boy. Anything.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
Tacos. Taco Tuesday.
Your favorite month?
November. My birthday's in it. And Thanksgiving.
Work out or hit the couch?
Work out.
Solo, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. Before we let you go, why don't you share with our audience the best way for them to connect with you and to do business with Calaxy?
Absolutely. You guys can catch me on all major social media platforms, Instagram at solo.ceesay, SOLO.CEESAY, on Twitter at soloceesay, no dot, on LinkedIn, and then you can obviously email me as well. All my information should be there, but obviously appreciate you Dr. Richards, for having me on the show. It's been a blast. Thank you so much, and excited to see where the future takes us.
Thank you. That's a wrap. Our guests have sent us so much swag, books, and giveaways this year. I can't wait to announce our monthly winner. So if you want exclusive content delivered right to your inbox and to enter into our monthly drawing, go to drfrancisrichards.com and subscribe to our mailing list. That's drfrancisrichards.com. drfrancisrichards.com. That's drfrancisrichards.com, and subscribe to our mailing list. We promise we will not spam you or sell your information.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.